It really was I suppose you would have said, a Jacksonville special attraction, because people did come from other places just to eat at Bernie's restaurant, you know.
Oh, I remember Bed Bernie very well. Yeah, he was a very nice man. And a nice,
green.
yeah, we had a nice restaurant there, and lots of people patronized him. And
He would always greet you at the door. Whenever you went to that restaurant, he was there waiting for you.
very genial.
And you'd have to wait because it was a packed house. It was an outstanding restaurant.
The food was delicious, very good food.
I just happened to have, for a number of years, one of my offices under his dwelling, which was on top of the Florida National Bank building on Laura Street. He would take the elevator to the 11th floor where I had my office, and then he would have to walk up a flight of stairs to get to his penthouse. And that's where Bernie lived for many years. And he ran what was really a distinctive restaurant. It was right next door to it was a calling. The Roosevelt was originally the Calling Hotel.
I know all about Bernie's restaurant. It was great. He had the best food in town. But he had a little advertising gimmick of wearing green clothes with a green hat even. And he had a green car. And one day, my husband was in the automobile business, and a lady needed a car brought back to her that he'd worked on, and he had no one to take it, and he said, "Would you take that for me?" I said, "Yeah, I will." Not thinking that I had no way to get back to the office. So when I started walking back, I saw Bernie going down Old San Jose Road, and he stopped whistling and said, "Shh, you need a ride, lady?" And so we rode. He took me back down there, and he was real nice. And he used to stand out in front of his restaurant, which was strange down here, and practically usher everybody in, you know.
On St. Patrick's Day, of course, he made a big deal out of the St. Pat's celebration, and this was fun to go to.
Well, he was very exacting, always very dressed just to a perfect tee with all that greenery. He had his restaurant was just his whole life practically, and he was a pleasure to talk to, and he made a point of knowing his customers, lots of them. We thought a lot of Mr. Bernie and his establishment.
Most people remembering Jacksonville's yesterdays think of it as we do today, as a good place to raise a family, to live and work, and enjoy life in a beautiful, beautiful setting. On the South Bank, the ferry landing was a popular resort where some of yesterday's most popular places of entertainment were congregated. There was Dixieland Park, our first Jacksonville landing kind of place. A fun place with all kinds of marvelous entertainment, bright lights, and glorious sights and sounds that drew people from miles and miles around. One of the best places at Dixieland was the ostrich farm, where you could actually ride on an ostrich.
I guess I was about 14 years old, and I was a carrier for the Jacksonville Journal, and they took us on a picnic one time to the alligator and ostrich farm, and we had a ride to see who could stay on the ostrich the longest, and I apparently stayed on longest. I do remember the ostrich, you got behind their wings and straddled him there, and he ran under a tree, and I reached up and grabbed a limb and let him go up ahead of me, but I got a prize, alligator or ostrich skin billfold.
The alligator farm and was originally started in 1898 on Talleyrand Avenue. Then it moved over to Phoenix Avenue and finally came to the south side. And one of the nicest things I did every year was to take my whole class down to the alligator and ostrich farm. We walked 2 by 2 down to the farm, and that was one of the highlights of our year.
Another place people loved to go was the alligator farm, where they could watch the great gators wallow in sand and mud.
We sat on the oldest alligator, I guess they said oldest alligator here anyway. Well, he just laid there. It's so old he didn't move, and we'd go and sit on him and then get up, and it was just a fascinating thing to do.
One of the most exciting things around was the roller coaster at Jacksonville Beach.
The roller coaster was wooden, and it was the ride, and it was very scary. And you were brave if you got on there and rode.
The roller coaster, you could hear the thing, the cars going clickety-click, clickety-click, clickety-click as it would go up to the top of the roller coaster. And then there'd be a moment of silence, and then you'd hear a lot of screams as the car would go over and start going around over the humps. People would get on the roller coaster and give the man a dollar, and that would give them 10 rides up till World War II, when they raised the rate to a quarter.
I had never really wanted to go on the roller coaster. It was frightening because it looked so high. But I had this gentleman friend who insisted I take a ride on the roller coaster. I wore glasses then as I do now. I took off my glasses, put them in my pocketbook, and of all things, sat on my pocketbook. Of course, at the end of the roller coaster ride, I had no glasses. It was just different.
I wasn't allowed to go to the beach on a date. And I guess I must have been 15. I went anywhere, of course, this boy and I. And I always had to be home at 11 o'clock. Well, we got on top of the roller coaster, and I almost jumped out, scared him to death, grabbed hold of him. And we finally made it off the roller coaster, and I hadn't thrown up or anything, and I was so proud. And we got in the car, and he couldn't find his keys. And we couldn't find his keys, and we couldn't find his keys. We had to go back to the roller coaster and underneath the roller coaster. They had to stop the roller coaster, and we found those keys underneath the roller coaster. And finally got home at 1 o'clock. My father was sitting there waiting. And I had the inevitable lecture.
The beaches will always be central in our recreational lives, as they were yesterday and are today. But yesterday's beaches and jetties scenes were quite different than those of today.
I'm not sure that Jacksonville Beach could ever be like it was. Of course, all of us who remember it want it to be that way. But seems that life was slower. I remember when JT and I would carry our children on Sunday afternoon to the boardwalk, and we'd put them on the rides and have a frozen custard and walk up and down the boardwalk. And there were a lot of people from Jacksonville who came, and they were all dressed up on Sunday. You didn't go to the boardwalk unless you were dressed. And that was very, in the summertime you were kind of hot, but the men all had on their shirts and tie maybe pulled down, but it was, I don't know, I'm thinking back, it was just a wonderful opportunity to take families out and meet your friends.
We had lots and lots of hot dog stands on the beach, on the boardwalk, and this was a real boardwalk, and portions of it all the way up until after World War II, when they concreted the walk.
a bunch of us would get underneath the boardwalk when people would drop their change and couldn't retrieve it. We'd retrieve it for them.
Up on the boardwalk, you could go to the shooting gallery or the Chinese string game or the pitch till you win or the fish games. There were 2 to 3 different sets of stands that you could knock people into the water with a baseball. You had baseball throws. You could stand and watch the taffy machine make the saltwater taffy, and the arms would go round and round and round and round and keep pulling the taffy out. And then the 2 or 3 little ladies would take and run the taffy through a machine that would cut them up into the little squares. And people would gather out front and watch this operation, sometimes for 20, 30 minutes at a time.
And I remember in front of the Perkins bathhouse were what we call the ropes. And people who couldn't swim would hang on to the ropes. And I didn't know how to swim when we first came to the beach. And my mother would say, well, you can go down if you will go down on the ropes. And they were, as the tide would come in and out, sometimes the ropes weren't high enough, but when they were just right would be the fun time to go. But they had collected this green slimy stuff on them, and it was ooky. And we would try to get part of the ropes that didn't have that stuff on them.
We would sometimes have pony rides there on the beach, and they'd set up a rope and they'd walk you around. One summer we had somebody come in with a bunch of little black bears, and I got too close and the black bear slapped me on the side of the face, and for years I had a little scar up near my eye here, and where this small black bear hit me.
Well, you just had fun down there, and you'd get in the sand, and you'd ride the waves. I learned how to ride the waves and how to guide yourself in. There wasn't any surfboards back then, so you just had to position your hands correctly and your head. Sometimes you'd get caught in a bad one and turn you upside down. You'd get full of sand. But other than that, it was just great fun to go and race people, and I would always swim out too far, and people would say, come back, shark's gonna get you. But I was not afraid of it.
At one point we had 3 sets of rides, so that gave us 3 carousels, 3 Ferris wheels, 3 sets of Dodgem cars, 3 complete sets of rides. And some of these would disappear during the winter. They'd go on a circuit, and then they would return in the summer. There were 2 or 3 different sets, at least 3 different shooting galleries on the beach, so there's always a plink, plink, plink as the 22 bullets hit the steel targets. And this was a very fun time.
I guess I miss, I don't know, what did you call it, the freedom, the not being afraid to go, and now I don't want to go out at night. My husband doesn't let me go out at night. And used to get with a bunch of children and go to the boardwalk or go play golf. Little miniature golf was all lit up at night. That was another thing we liked. And you just aren't given that freedom. I think that's what I miss most, that my grandchildren won't have the experiences that I had, and I don't know that we can ever cure that.
The older we grow, the longer the trail of yesterdays we leave behind. History tells us that if we don't learn from yesterday, it will become tomorrow. But we can never get enough of these kinds of yesterdays. The way things were in the good old days for many of us. We hope you've enjoyed this bit of nostalgia, this look at Jacksonville as we remember it, as it was yesterday.